Looking forward now to introducing our panelist today and to welcoming you now to this Gen Z meets the workplace discussion with the best lineup of speakers I can imagine. We have Professor Dr. Nick Van Dam, who is the Chief Learning Officer of IE. Warm welcome to you, Nick. Great to have you here today.
Yeah, delighted to be there.
Excellent. We have Hussein Freijeh, who is the General Manager for Middle East and North Africa of SNAP Incorporated. Welcome, Hussein.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I'm here. Thanks for the invitation.
My pleasure. Now we have a brief 30-minute panel and a lot of ground to cover here. So I wanted to kick it off very quickly. I'm going to have each of you introduce yourself just very fast. What is your role in the world of talent management and development? And just in one phrase or sentence, how do you identify with Gen Z? So why don't we start? Let's start with Hussein.
So I run the operation in the Middle East and North Africa out of Dubai. We built the operation from scratch 4 years ago. So we're around now 60 to 80, 70 people, growing massively. Gen Z is like, we're a platform for Gen Z. To us, like, we understand that generation really well. It is important because we serve that generation that we have this generation in our employee population. So looking forward to this panel to talk about that more in details.
Excellent. Looking forward to your insights, Hussein. Great, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Amber, and welcome everyone. I'm Chief Learning Officer at IE. I'm also leading. I'm a director of a Center for Corporate Learning and Human Resources. As part of that, I'm leading a couple of programs that basically attracts senior executives from corporations from all over the world who are responsible for learning and development for their workforce. In addition to that, I'm affiliated with McKinsey & Company. I have been a partner at McKinsey before I joined IE. And as a consequence, I'm in touch with a number of organizations around the world when it comes to recruitment and talent and thinking about Gen Z. And of course, I'm also in touch with Gen Z as part of the university. I'm teaching also in different programs, and it's wonderful to learn from the new generation.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. And we have an audience here who is hungry to hear more. So I'm going to get right into my questions for both of you. First of all, our organization we have 700 business schools in 92 countries. So many of our talent are Gen Z. So we're talking about those born between 1997, 2015. So you're currently looking at the 6 to 24 year age range now in 2021, graduating into a pandemic, many of them. Now, Hussein, at SNAP, as you review candidatures of applicants, what are you considering to be the top career deal makers and the career deal breakers at the Gen Z level?
I think before we talk about Gen Z in specific, we have to acknowledge the fundamental change that happened in the dynamics of the relationship between companies and employees. I remember when I was young, growing up with my dad, that the relationship at that time was pretty transactional. I hire you to deliver a certain task. In many cases, actually, you deliver a certain number of hours. If you remember, like, there's something called overtime, where, like, if you deliver more hours, I'll pay you more overtime to do that. It was that relationship was built based on I give you and you give me back. We've seen a major fundamental change in that relationship between corporates and employees, where it evolved massively into a partnership. It became, come in and partner with me. Let's create a nice thing. Let's create a big product, or let's impact people's lives. And the fundamental component of that relationship is based on shared values. Any partnership in the world has a common ground that you build on. This kind of partnerships between employees and companies that we're seeing these days as the key factor behind success is built on the foundation of you have to share values together for that relationship to work. And I think when it comes to Gen Z, it's exactly the same thing. At SNAP, values represent really big part of how we operate, how we work internally, even how we work externally. And being part of that process, we look at values like kind. Like, within kind is empathy, being able to instill trust, having the courage to have conversations and be able to have the right position in wherever you are be. The second value is creative, is how can you manage ambiguity, how can you make decisions and all those kind of things. And then there is and then smart in terms of creativity and all those kinds. So those kind of values are extremely important for us when we look at them. Now, when it comes to Gen Z, this is a population and demographic that represents a big part of our consumer base. And having the Gen Z in the process within our employee population is extremely crucial to make sure that we have a product that understands the needs and requirements of that population. So for us, it's values, it's the contribution and impact they're ready to make, and of course, the skill sets needed to get that done.
Excellent. So we're talking about aligning one's personal values with the organization's values, and at the same time, we're looking at a fiercely competitive global business landscape. So Nick, what do you suggest Gen Z students and alumni need to adapt in order to secure opportunities in this extremely competitive world?
Yeah, thanks, Amber. And similar to Hussein, I like to put your question in context. If we look ahead, the next decade, there will be a massive transformation of work. So as an example, it is expected that 1 out of 4 jobs will disappear over the next decade. Now, there will be a lot of new jobs created. A number of them that we don't know, right? So they have very different competencies in different industries, etc. And what we know today is that every single person needs to upskill or reskill him or herself. And as Hussein referred to, there's also a change in relationship between employer and employee. And organizations will have a lot of different kind of relationships with people who are supporting the organization, not just anymore the full-time people who are on the payroll, but there are many kind of ways that organizations will collaborate and work with a workforce. So that as a start. So now I would say, if you think about the big trends, and digitization, I didn't mention that one, is another big one, right? So we have seen over the last 1.5 years that companies have accelerated the digitization, and this will continue. So my advice, if you join the workforce or if you are in the workforce today, you need to reflect each year on your personal development and growth. And basically ask yourself a number of questions, right? So what kind of new tasks that I've been working on? Have you done work outside of your comfort zone? Have you been interacting with new customers, new teams? Have you participated in formal or informal development programs? And if you come to the conclusion that you have not expanded your capabilities with, let's say, 30 to 40%, it's time to move on. It's time to move on. Because as in this world, and if we look ahead, you are responsible for your own development. And basically, learning happens a lot on the job. So if you are in a place where you don't feel you progress enough, it's not a place to stay. Because, particularly at different stages in your career, it's all about your personal development.
Excellent words of wisdom there, Nick, and great food for thought for our audience. And career decisions are amongst the most important that we're making. So that's greatly appreciated. Now, Hussein, did you want to add anything to that in terms of how you foresee Gen Z candidates needing to adapt to such a competitive landscape?
I really like what Dr. Nick mentioned around the need to overlay your academic learning with real life learning and being able to continuously do that. When you finish university, this is not the last time you're going to be learning about something. You're going to get into a course, you're going to read a book, you're going to decide to learn something always. But you will never be able to make an impact for this knowledge without being able to know how you can practically apply this in real life and have enough expertise to learn it while master it and then be able to use it as a tool to do that. That is what's different now. These days, you have to learn, you have to have it in you to continuously learn because businesses are changing. If you look at businesses now, they're very different to how they were 15 years ago. And as Dr. Nick mentioned, very different 15 years later. The only way to maintain your competitiveness is to make sure you have it in you, the ability to merge your academic learning with your real life learning. And I think that skill set, we appreciate it a lot at Job because our businesses are changing. And many times we don't know how, and we need time to learn it. And it's just those kind of employees that can help us learn changes and adapt with them. So that's a really very powerful point. If this is one advice,
Right.
it would be that building that skill set within the next generation.
Excellent. And you've talked as well, Hussein, about the kindness and the empathy and the creativity. Nick, have you seen any clear evolution when it comes to the skills that the Gen Z should be ramping up and boosting to increase their employability going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Amber. Yeah. So if we reflect again on what's ahead of us, right? So, huge change will be driven by advancement in technologies. And according to the World Economic Forum, by 2025, about 50% of all the work will be done by machines. And that's a significant increase from where we are today. So it's important for us to reflect on, where can we play as humans? And I believe that we will never win it from the machine on tasks that the machine is really good at, right? So if you think about processing data, we will never win it from the machine. There are AI applications reviewing legal documents, thousands times faster than we can do as humans. We will never win it from the machine. So therefore, we need to ask ourselves the question, okay, what is our green spot or our blue sea, right? And, if you look at a number of different reports from McKinsey, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, they all point in one direction. And that direction is, as humans, we need to have, cognitive skills. Think about critical thinking, problem solving. Now, you might listen and say, oh, well, that's what I'm doing. And sure, that's what we do. But do you know what? You can develop different levels of proficiency when it comes to problem solving and critical thinking. Another key area are the human skills or the soft skills, but I call them the power skills. Because if you think about the technical skills, if you want to learn, let's say, an application, or you want to learn something like about law or business, that's not that difficult. You read a book and you can master it. But if you think about, and Hussein was referring to that, creativity, innovation. Well, you cannot just read a book about creativity and after reading that book, you are creative. Or leading a team. Okay, well, do you know what? That's a skill that you will develop over time. And hopefully, during your study, you had a chance to collaborate with a lot of people, to work in teams. And as a consequence, you have developed team building and team leading skills. So human skills are very important. Also think about emotional intelligence. But also a new one is this year identified by the World Economic Forum, resilience, stress tolerance, being flexible. And I think we have all experienced that over the last 1.5 years, right? So we all need to adjust, adapt to a new reality. And the people who are doing that really well, obviously, they are the winners. And it's also a muscle that we can develop. And you develop it by basically being exposed to fast changing environments, being open to do things in a different way. Unlearning is a very important competence. And then lastly, technology, right? So if you look at the world of tomorrow, basically, no matter what you do, technology will play a bigger role. So I believe that, every single person who graduates, but also every person in the workforce need to say, okay, how can I double down in understanding technology, using with different applications, but also the role of big data and analytics, that will play a huge role in every organization. How can I use data and analytics and predictive analytics to make evidence-based decisions? So that's our kind of, the key competency themes that we have to work on as people. And I think if we do, there will be tremendous opportunities, because I'm very optimistic about the future. Those of us who have the right skills, the right mindsets, there are tremendous opportunities.
Wow, Nick, you've touched upon so many important points there, from automation and humans not beating machines to the importance of the human skills, and also the analytics and how this is coming now into play with recruiting processes. And we look at, for example, game-based assessments now to assess those cognitive and emotional traits. I want to ask Hussein, in this digital economy, how is social media, and being general manager of Snap, how is social media changing the way the Gen Zers are marketing and positioning themselves in the workforce? If we listen to Nick and listen to these skill sets and what we should be emphasizing from our profiles, how is this changing? How should Gen Zers be positioning and marketing themselves? How is social media changing that?
As much as we think the landscape is really competitive, and I agree to that, and it's maybe a little bit difficult to penetrate that. On the flip side, I think this generation is a lucky generation when it comes to the access they have to information and technology that allows them to self-develop. Just go back 20 years ago and think 10 years later of the amount of the technology available and the amount of knowledge available for people to grasp and turn into knowledge and hence into skill set. And I think that is very powerful. So Gen Z you have to think very soon, in years from now, Gen Z will be a generation that's fully digitally native since birth, right? And that intersects with what Dr. Nick was talking about, with technology being core to any business in the world now. So that's a generation that since birth is used to technology every day, every night. And businesses now are looking at every way to leverage technology and transform digitally. And I think that intersection should be extremely exciting for this generation. Only if you're able to, as we said before, to grasp this knowledge and turn it into experience and skill set. I think here there are a couple of points that are necessary to visualize how we do in that process. First, there's the component of understanding how businesses work. This is what I talked before. Like if I'm a Gen Z and I'm just graduating, it's very important for me before I even graduate that I don't start my experience on graduation. I should be more engaged right before graduation with any opportunity out there. Being in a conference like the one we are in now, internships has been extremely impactful in terms of how you do the side jobs, side projects, personal projects, hobbies. All those kind of tools allow people to get into the field earlier than, and then increase your ability to compete in that perspective. The second thing is being realistic and making sure you pace your expectations as you go. One of the things you have when you have a lot of knowledge coming into that is you have high expectations and you expect high rewards. It's extremely important to know that when you set a goal, you have to understand exactly what's required to get to that goal and have the right patience to get there. We see a lot of times people in a hurry, or people think because they know this area that they could be X and Y and Z. I think one tool that could be used here that I don't see a lot of Gen Z in this part of the world use is mentoring and coaching. Is as you get into the real world, it is extremely important that you're surrounded and supported by a set of mentors and coaches that could get you through that process. There's knowledge, but there's as well what do you do with the knowledge is extremely important. The last point for me is making sure that you accept what we call, I wouldn't call it failures, accept stuff not to go the way we want them to go, because this is what learnings are. And organizations now are becoming way more open and way more accepting to people just failing and repeating again and resetting and moving forward. Before, failing in a job 90% of the time, most of the time, meant getting fired. In these days, corporations want people to fail because this is a learning that goes forward. And I think understanding that this is okay will make a lot of those people really successful and gets them to accelerate their career really fast.
Wow, fantastic. So you touched on things. Yes, please. You want to add to that, Nick?
What Hussein is saying, I think it's the terrific points he's making, and two things to consider. One is in terms of kind of mentoring, coaching. Like organizations have a board, huh? And I recommend every professionals to have your own personal board, huh? A board of advisors to you in your work and your career, and that could be people who are in your organization, but also people who are outside of your organization. And they help you to think through some of the challenges that you might have. And if you think about your future, what to do. So that's one advice. The second one is referring to failure. We know that if we only learn if we do things that we have never done before. And that means we need to get out of our comfort zone into our learning zone. And that's also the place where we fail once in a while, and that's perfectly fine. Now, it requires us to have the confidence to fail. And, I've done a lot of work on this topic, on confidence, and done a lot of workshops, including at McKinsey. And you know what? Confidence is something you can develop. There are a lot of methods, ways to do that, methods, etc. It's about mindset, but you can develop your confidence. And it's important because we need to get outside of our comfort zone.
Excellent. And I want to just add to that, absolutely great points about those setbacks that you encounter on your career path and career journeys, and having a mentor, someone who can help to get you back up on your feet when you fall and just keep on moving forward. Fantastic points. And about having the realistic expectations, and that's something that we do a lot of work in hired EFMD, just aligning those expectations that talent have coming into their programs, perhaps from admissions, and their expectation for their career aspirations coming out. And great points as well, Hussein, in terms of the employer connections and the different internships, for example, and making those connections with the employers. So I want to bring it into the academic institution context, Nick. And if you can just talk about how does education need to change as we listen to both of you here with your thoughts and insights on Gen Z. What are you doing to change in terms of the structure and content at the business school level to make sure that the Gen Zers are as adaptive as possible when they come out of their programs?
Yeah, thanks, Amber. Well, I will answer that question from a global perspective, right? So for all universities around the world, I try to do that at least and give you my point of view. Well, the first thing is we need to make sure that we educate people for the jobs of the future. Right? That's one. That requires institutions to change fast, to update your curriculum all the time, not every 3, 4, 5 years. It needs to happen on the fly. That's kind of one thing. Secondly, we need to just move away from knowledge acquisition, and I put it a little bit black and white, knowledge acquisition to developing applicable expertise, developing key lifelong skills, but also mindsets. That's the second one. And in terms of the how, well, the best way to learn is basically by doing, right? So we need to make sure that learning is working and working is learning. So what does it mean actually? Well, basically that we need to have, students in teams working on specific projects. We need to make sure that they are using applications in their work, in their study, that are used when they join the workforce, right? So that's key. So technology in everything. Teamwork is key. But also engaging a lot of people like Hussein, who are basically working in companies as adjunct faculty, because they can bring in the day-to-day reality in programs.
That's fantastic, and I love to hear that that's where the direction that things are moving in, because it's very clear that you're in tune with the labor market demands and what the employers are looking for, and that's vital when creating and designing new programs. Now, Hussein, in terms of a culture of diversity and inclusion, which we hear so much about these days, and fortunately we're seeing more and more diversity officers, inclusion officers are a part of selection processes and HR departments. Now, with the studies that we have that show that this culture of diversity and inclusion lends and contributes to creativity, which is one of those values that you mentioned at the start of the session, entrepreneurial mindedness, innovation, which has an impact on the bottom line. What is Snap doing to source and attract diverse Gen Z talent?
I mean, if you look at diversity and inclusion, I think the time we're going through now is a fundamental milestone in the process of building a more diverse and inclusive cultures in general, let alone within companies. I think there's a lot of momentum within the corporate world and in society now. And I think if we leverage we could make a progress we wanted to do generations ago. When it comes to corporates and Snap, this is I would say this is the most prominent topic for us in the company. We spend hours and hours and hours talking about how can we leverage our strength and our ability to make progress and build a more diverse and inclusive culture. The interesting part now, I genuinely believe that building a diverse and inclusive culture in the last probably 10 years wasn't nice to have, unfortunately. I don't really think that's the case anymore these days. I think companies now, there's a fundamental, if you look at the one of the key successes required for companies, building a strong culture is a key component to that. You can succeed as a business now without building a very strong culture. And you will never be able to build a strong culture without diversity and inclusion being at the heart of how you build this culture. And that's the fundamental belief that Snapchat have, and it translates into how we do that. So it's a lot of things that we do, but I would actually summarize into there's a component of how we hire, and this is looking at pipelines, looking at representation, looking at how questions that we ask, and making sure that programs like our intern programs help us kind of accelerate that. Whenever there's a shortage in pipeline, there's always an internship program or programs that helps us benefit from that. So there is how we get people in, but then even when people get in, there's how we keep the process of education and to change mindsets and create advocates for diversity and inclusion. We have a lot of initiatives like something we call the Big Idea. IDEA stands for, I forgot what it stands for now. I'm sorry, inclusion, diversity, equality, equity, and awareness. And this is where we bring employees and from all over the world to talk about their own diversity experiences. And it's kind of inspires a lot of people. And then we do a lot of work within groups like women groups or ethnic groups, etc. I think all this effort makes it at the heart of our culture and makes Gen Z a crucial component to that.
Fantastic. And we are coming up now. We're at the top of the hour. I'm just going to have you finish with one. I'm going to give you a statement to finish with just a one-liner. And then we have the Ask Me Anything session. So I'm sure the audience will want to continue engaging one-on-one. So just finish this statement, Nick. The future of work is, and Gen Zers can adapt and prepare by.
Yeah, well, the future of work is all about learning agility. And Gen Z can adapt and prepare themselves to become lifelong learners.
Love it. Thank you. Hussein.
Can you say it again?
Yes. The future of work is?
Values and self-learning.
And Gen Zers can adapt and prepare by?
Self-learning.
Excellent. Thank you so much to both Dr. Nick Van Dam and Hussein Freijeh. Fantastic insights that we've had throughout this panel. I've certainly learned so much from you both that I will continue to spread that word and knowledge and those great tips to the Gen Zers out there who, let's face it, it is challenging times, right? In a very fast evolving world of human resources and HR tech. So it's so important to stay abreast on what's going on. Even like Nick said, the CVs updated. We do live CV clinics. I have 2 going on today. This is critical, right? It's something we all need to be working on day in and day out. Thank you both. Sophie.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.